But I will say, for people who are still unsure of whether or not they want to be an artist or actor, it is 100% possible to make a living as an artist. And I would say, like, the things that come with having a steady, like, 9 to 5 job, the kind of stability that comes with that, do not come without their challenges as well. There's a certain kind of, like, stagnancy that one feels, especially if they have an inner artist that they need to creatively, like, export out of them, that really will cause you personal issues in your life if you're not being exposed to that. I have several friends who have stable jobs, 9 to 5 jobs, they have a salary, and they have this artistic inclination that we used to collaborate on, but they no longer have the time for. And they'll come to me like, yo, I miss that stuff. I miss being an artist. Like, oh my God, like let's collaborate. Like, let's find a way to do that, because I miss it. Because the most important thing that I've learned about what it means to, like, be successful as an actor is to honor yourself. It's no different than what people who are working in finance are doing, or working in teaching are doing, education or politics. They're trying to honor their own purpose. And if you work against that, there's really no form of success that will fulfill you, and you'll only feel kind of like cheated, for lack of a better word. And it's better to find the difficulties in success of what you want to be doing than to kind of, like, choose a more traditional or societally accepted route. Because then I mean, it's like, you gotta pick your battle somewhere. Are you going to find difficulties in what you love, or are you just gonna find the difficulties of being, like, unfulfilled, but you get it back? You know what I mean? I don't know.
That makes total sense, because when it's something that you love, the difficulties are, I want to say, a little bit easier to get through, because you have, it's like your heart is, it's corny, it sounds corny, but your heart is leading you. And it's sort of like, I know that this is so hard. I know that I may not be making the amount of money that I want to be making right now, but my soul is so desperate to be fulfilled that I can't do anything else. And, like, that sort of love for the art allows you to, like, keep going through. Whereas, like you're saying, like, there are difficulties in the other side. And if you're unfulfilled and there are challenges,
that's like, you just feel stuck. And what I'll say as well is, like, I also am now making a living as an actor. You know, I just graduated in May, and I'm like, wow, I'm, like, knock on wood, consistently getting paid to do what I love now. I've worked my whole life for this, and now I'm able to support myself with what I love to do. And that kind of, like, that to me feels worth all of it, because now I get kind of, I get to have my cake and eat it too. You know, I get to do this workshop and realize, I go home and be like, wow, I'm getting paid for that. All of that fun stuff I get to do. It's worth it.
That's beautiful. Congratulations on that. That's
you.
A really, that's huge. So how did you go about getting your agent?
So that's a direct result of my education. When I graduated with my bachelor's back in 2019, I knew I was going to NYU for my master's.
Okay. So, where'd you graduate from for your bachelor's?
Muhlenberg College.
Okay.
So I knew I was going to NYU by the time the showcase and stuff came around, like the theatrical showcase for the school. So I got some attention from agents, but I didn't really follow up on them, because I'm like, I'm not going to sign with representation and go to grad school. That makes no sense.
Right.
I actually just a couple months ago, like, looked through my email, and I found that, like, a couple, like, notable agents had reached out to me back then, but I had no idea who they were. And I was like, I can't believe I didn't meet with the Buckwalk, like,
hilarious.
back then. Like, you know what I mean? It's crazy. But I knew I was going to grad school. So, but then I went to grad school, right? And then we had a showcase, obviously, through my MFA program. And that's where these different representation, you know, the school kind of handle that, coordinated and organize that, so that they would have our information and be able to reach out to us and let us know who's interested, and we'd schedule meetings. And from then on, it's just a matter of, you know, who you click with, who clicks with you, and forming a relationship from that point on. And I was really lucky to sign with Innovative, because
they're great.
They were by far my favorite meeting I had of all the meetings I had through my showcase. And you know, our relationship has been really great. So I got
so I want to talk about that, like the meetings with agents and managers, and like you said that it's about who you click with, and I wanna highlight that, because I think especially young actors and actors in the beginning are like, anyone please sign me. And I get that, but also this is going to be your team. This is going to be like almost like a family. Like you have to really make sure that these are people that you can trust
100%.
with, because you know, we know that as actors, this is our humanity too. So can you talk about what did clicking with Innovative feel like? What did that look like?
So I'll answer that by first saying what clicking didn't feel like with a couple other agencies, who I won't name because that's mean, right? But there was an agency that I met with early on in the process, right? And this is after having a lot of classes in grad school about what a good agent is like, what a good managers are like. So they made sure we prepared in terms of what to look for ourselves. So I go to this agency, and it's a very small office, very small. There's 2 people in it. And they asked me to meet with them at, I think, 3 o'clock. It was 3 o'clock, right? And I got there at like 2:55. And I walk in, and they're like, have a seat. We'll meet. We'll be with you in just a second. I'm like, cool. And I sit down, and like I said, very small. I can see both of them, right? Sitting there.
Okay.
So 5 minutes go by, it's 3 o'clock. I'm like, okay, that's all right. They're still working. You know, 10 more minutes go by, it's 3:10. You know, 10 more minutes, 3:20. I'm like, and was I early, or? And I asked them, like, was I early? They're like, no, you're good. We'll be with you in 1 second. And then it's like almost 3:30 at that point, and I'm like, all right, I actually have to go. So if you guys don't have the time, I'm just gonna head out. And it was great to see you. Like, I just set my boundary. And in that moment, I'm like, I can see myself as like a high schooler, like right out of high school, 17, 18, sitting there waiting until 4:15, because I'm afraid of like what they might think of me if I set my.
And you want to be chosen.
Exactly. And at this point, where I'm at right now, if 3:10, I'll be like, look, y'all, what's up? I can see you. There's nothing going on, you know? So, and then I got in the meeting with this person, and she was completely unprepared. She hadn't seen my resume. She was like, what did you do? Oh, okay, I see you did that. Had nothing prepared to ask me. And I'm like, you know, I'm good. Because I don't feel seen by you. You know what I mean? And that's not, in any professional relationship, it's not something you have to settle for. And at least not for any stretch of time. So that's what I'll say was like the opposite end of that, where it's like, you don't actually consider me as a human being. I already know where that relationship is going to go professionally. What clicks so well with who I'm working with now is that they were incredibly collaborative. I didn't meet with one agent. I met with like 5 people on the team. You know what I mean? And they actually had kept having to postpone the meeting because there was one agent that couldn't be there because he was on his honeymoon. And they were like, we're so sorry, but we really want to make sure he's there to meet you as well, because we're very collaborative. And speaking with them, it felt like that. It was a group conversation. We were talking about what it means to be an artist. We were sharing ideas. I was asking questions and not being judged. I was offering things like valid concerns, and they were meeting that with like grace, empathy, and understanding. They're like, oh, that makes sense to us. Like, we see, oh, you think that way. Here's where we're at. Really meeting me where I am and trying to really understand me as a person. It's a lot like, it's a lot like other relationships as well. It's like, do I feel heard by this person, and do they feel the same way? Like, do we understand each other? And it's a very intuitive thing. And I think something that it takes experience to be able to trust, because at first you're just so afraid that without representation, you won't make it or anything like that. You won't find success. But it's a kind of intuitive, understanding that you feel in the moment, where you're like, I just like talking to you all. I like where you are conceptually about what the business is, and I can see myself working with you all. So
that's amazing. Yeah, I following your gut, and I really agree with what you said about it's like any relationship. Do you
yeah,
feel safe? Do you
right,
feel seen? Do you feel heard? Do you feel loved? Do you
exactly,
feel I remember when I met with my manager that I have now,
yeah,
I what was one of the things that was really important to me was, does he believe in me as much as I believe in myself? Like,
right.
do you
That's
understand
big, right, right,
what you have in
exactly,
front of you right now?
right, right.
And do we align with where we see me going?
Mm-hmm.
Like when it like in that first meeting I was like, I don't want to audition for these things. I don't want to be on this network, that sort
Right.
of thing. And that's really important. And I think what we're talking about here is like ownership, and kind of like ownership over your, not just your art, but like of your career.
Yeah.
Like it is a collaboration between you and an agent or a manager. It's not just you work for them, you work for each other, and it's a
Right.
team effort.
Right.
So it's really not about you feeling chosen. You have to
Yeah.
choose that person too.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. That's something that I do credit a lot to my grad school training, the kind of ownership
Mm-hmm.
over my own process, because
Mm.
I was kind of forced to throughout the like difficulties of that program. But that's how I feel like it goes with a lot of students or a lot of like young people, is like that experience kind of like hones your character and gives you the experience you have in your work gives you some integrity about like
Yeah.
what you mean to the work, what you mean to people, not just
Yeah.
what people can do for you, but like
Yeah.
you can do for others. Like I know you're gonna make that manager some money. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
I know
And
I can help you get
yeah,
bread too. Like
exactly.
it's ain't a one-way street.
Right.
Um, so it's
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, it's like that meme, like, he's a problem, but I packed that thing too. Whatever it was.
Right.
Like I have something to bring to the table, and it's worth something. Yeah. And
Yeah,
every young person should feel that way sooner rather than later. Yeah.
I agree. I would have, if I would have known that earlier, it would have, we have our journeys and our lessons, but I
Yeah.
definitely like, it's a game changer once
Of
you
course.
realize that you have something valuable to offer.
Of course. I mean, that's a big reason I went to grad school was
I
to,
was actually just going to ask you, why did you go to
yeah.
grad school?
I went to grad school for the main reason being I didn't have enough training. I didn't feel trained enough. My high school, I did not feel as though a majority of the students there legitimately wanted to be, legitimately wanted to be actors for a living. And maybe they thought they did, or they didn't know they did. But I was one of the few people who took it as seriously as I did. So it was hard to get training when the teacher has to,
Mm,
refresh the fundamentals of acting and introductory
yeah.
stuff like that. And similarly in college, I actually felt pretty similarly as well. It's just people who
Got
were a
it.
little bit, I felt, um, not clear about what they really wanted out of this career.
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt kind of held back educationally about what it is I was learning. So I needed more training. I needed to work on my craft more specifically. I needed conservatory training because I went to a liberal arts school, and
Mm-hmm.
I got the kind of like worldly education that I was missing, but
Yeah.
theatrically I felt like really under resourced. And so that's what made me apply to the grad schools that I did.
Yeah.
The NYU, Yale, Juilliard, and USD, because I'm like, I'm not going to go to a program that is, on a similar par with where my undergrad school was, because I need a lot of resources. I want access to those things.
Yes.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
the other reason I went to grad school is because I know that this is what I'm going to do for my whole life. Like, I know theater is going to be at the core of what I do for my whole
Mm-hmm.
life. And
Mm-hmm.
so I want to pursue as much of a network, as much of a family in that as soon as I can, as much as possible. And I'm somebody who is like, because I've been in school since I was 6, right? I go to school in the first grade,
Mm-hmm.
and I go all the way through straight to get my master's until I'm 24.
Yeah.
So I'm in school for 18 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I don't want a gap year. because then it's going to turn into 2, and that's going to turn into 4, and then I'm going to try to be thinking about, do I want to go to grad school when I'm 28 or 29? Which, there's no issues with that. A big part of my class was in that age range, and I feel like that's probably more normal, actually. But I wanted to get that training as soon as possible.
Yeah.
So that I can understand what's going on in those circles and go, okay, great. I feel like I have this large, extensive educational background behind me. I now feel equipped to like use the tools that work for me and work in the professional world in a way that makes sense to me. So I wanted to get that training. I wanted to get it right away, and I wanted to build that network. Those are the main reasons I went to grad school. Also, a lot of coaches and mentors suggesting that it might be a good route for me, and me looking into it. And, you know, a lot of help from people older than me who have done grad school, who are like, you know, the things you're looking for, grad school can have. So,
you know. I think what you said, first of all, that those are very intentional reasons. It sounds like you were very intentional about why you wanted to go.
For sure.
And I think that's super important when you do anything, is to be like, why exactly am I doing this? What do I want to get out of it?
Yes.
But something specifically that resonated with me that you said was that you weren't getting. You looked at how the people in your past education were kind of like treating the profession or the craft. And I can imagine. Like I've heard for me personally, I have felt the same in the past. And I can say that I was kind of scared to go to the more challenging class where there were people who were better than me. And it felt very uncomfortable. But then you realize, like, the more that I'm challenged and the more that I see that there are people better than me. So what am I gonna do about that?
Exactly.
am I just gonna stay in the class where the people around me don't take this as seriously, or you know, they don't know what they want to do, or am I gonna move toward the harder thing and challenge myself to maybe fail and be bad a little bit?
Seriously.
I can imagine that in, you know, NYU was probably a completely different world from what you were used to in terms of talent and, you know, skill.
Absolutely. And, you know, surprisingly enough, when I got to grad school, of course, there were brilliant actors around me. And finally, I'm like, okay, yes, people who are devoted to this. But then I also learned there are people there in my class who, like, their process is doing great. Their acting process, they came in, their acting process is great, but they don't know how to be a professional. That's maybe why they're here. Is like, here's this thing that I have taken for granted in terms of, like, this is how everyone does it. Everyone's a professional. Everyone comes in prepared. Everyone communicates problems and issues as clearly and you know, ahead of time as possible. This is what professionals do. And then working with other some grad actors who are like fantastic actors, but they don't understand how to be a professional in the room. And it's like, wow, like, there's really a lot of elements to being a professional in any aspect, especially in acting. Like, there's a lot that comes with this, and there are a lot of areas that people need to improve on. And I can learn so much from that fact, because now I feel less threatened by talent.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because I see in this process, like, I came prepared, and this other actor maybe didn't come as prepared, even though they might be talented and kind of naturally gifted. And that's something that I have to continue to do that. Because now one day I'm going to run into the actor that's gifted and prepared. And it's like, okay, like, damn, like, we
now
here.
That's the competition.
Yes, we here. Like, okay. You know what I mean? Like, that, here comes that challenge. So it's like everyone's working on something. And also a little bit of a tangent, but it took me a couple months to, like, start to realize, like, I also can't get frustrated by that. I can't allow myself to get for unprofessionalism to bother me, because that's something that I have to be so prepared that it really doesn't make a difference if the other actor isn't. Like, it might be slowing the project down, But I can't, then if I'm upset about that, then I'm taking ownership over the collaborative experience, which I shouldn't be doing in the first place. And so kind of like making room for other people's paths and not feeling entitled to their process because it doesn't look like mine. And they can turn around and have a fantastic performance. They can crash and burn, but I can't feel entitled to that simply because they're not doing it how I would. You know, I have that. Real. That saves some of my energy to actually focus on my work. You
know? That's beautiful. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about your Richard III experience.
Yes.
So walk me through, what was that audition process like?
Yes, so another benefit of being a grad acting, the public really likes NYU grad acting. Nice. They had auditions for my whole class. So the couple casting directors came into grad acting, came onto the floor, and they auditioned my whole class, and they recorded it to send to the rest of the team, the creative team. And so we all did a monologue, any Shakespearean monologue, about like 2 minutes, and they recorded it, and they were like, great, thank you very much. And then that was like pretty basic. You just come in, do your work, and peace. Then I got like a couple weeks later, I got a call back to come and audition in front of the director and other members of the creative team. So people who are a little more involved in the like final decision making of the cast. And so that audition was really fun because Robert, the director, asked me to do some things I did not expect.
I love that.
Which I'm all for that. Like, if you know me, I love live auditions because the ability to kind of think on my feet, be present, and stay buoyant is like a skill that I have that I love to share. Yeah. So being live in person just helps me feel at ease with that. So one of the things he asked me to do was, I came and I did the new piece that I had to bring in now for this callback, which is part of the actual play of Richard III. Came in, I did that piece, and he was like, "Okay, good." He was like, "Why don't you show me the first piece you auditioned with for the first round?" And I was like, "Oh, sure." And in my head, I'm like, "Oh, fuck." I have not. Remember, it's been a few weeks.
Right. Yeah.
I have not looked at it. I was not prepared to do that. So I was like, "Yeah, sure." I turned around. I was like, "Oh my God!" Like, I pray that piece is still there. Like, oh boy. Thankfully, it was. Yes, it was. It was there. Excuse me. And he was like, "Great. I want you to put that character into the one you just brought in." I was like, "Ooh." I was like, "I can do that."
Yeah.
And I did it. And he stopped me midway through. He was like, "Yes, excellent adjustment." That was it. And that was it. And next thing I heard, I got an offer, and I signed on, and that was it. Yeah, it was a
beautiful. Okay, so
experience. Yeah.
I love a fun audition. As soon as you said that the audition was fun, I was like, oh, that's such a gift.
Yeah.
So that was the audition process. Let's backtrack a little bit. What is your audition process when you're preparing for it? What does that look like?
Excuse me. It looks different every time. My process is very like, it's very porous.
Okay.
So like if I get a self-tape, right, and I read the script or I read the sides and I'm not that into it, I'm like, I would do this, but like, it's not a story that I feel like called to. I'll just do the technical stuff. I'll prepare the character. I'll look at the facts of the character. I'll, work through kind of like what's the action of the scene, just the technical stuff. And I'll prepare the audition. I'll be a professional and I'll do my job, right? Yeah. Because I will do this gig, but it's not something where I'm like, feel like deeply called to. If I get an audition for something where I'm like, this story is like amazing. Like, I don't care what part I have in this story. I want you to tell the story. My approach is a bit more spiritual, a bit more grounded in kind of like a certain like excavation of myself to kind of pull out what might be useful for the greater message of this story.
Okay.
That makes sense. Do you know what I mean? It's a kind of like, if I get an audition for like to play a you know, somebody who comes from Cuba who's a drummer who's getting a you know, a new job in this in the country, I relate to that. My parents are immigrants. You know what I mean? I relate to that. I maybe talk to them about it. I tell them about these roles, and I like think about my own past and like what it means to be a first generation person, and I come at it from more of an individualized sense. So my process of auditioning kind of goes that way, where it's like, what is this? What would this role mean to me? And in answering that question, I identify the kind of process I need to build for myself. Because what might happen is if I get if I'm up for a role that might be kind of big or really important, but it's a story that I don't feel fully like I identify with. Not that's a problem, but this is a little bit like, oh, okay, I don't fully see myself in this story, but I try to invest my full identity in it just for the audition, I might find a lot of frustration in that. I might get in my own way because I'm trying to identify fully with a story that I don't feel totally clicks with me. And I'm somebody who, like, I'm capable of being like, I will do a job as an actor to get paid if I know that that's what I'm doing. And I'm comfortable with that for this role. I can't do that all the time. That's not my life. But I also am an actor to make a living. It's my passion as well as my profession. So it pays me as well as what fulfills me. So identifying what those roles for me would be is what kind of sets my audition process in motion. As well as, do I know anybody on the casting team? Do I know the directors? What is their directing style? What kind of pieces have they made in the past? What have they collaborated on in the past? If it's a casting director that's come into my school, NYU, to speak to us, let me go look at my notes. You know, what kinds of things are they looking for? What kinds of action points clarify things to them? Kind of tapes are they looking for? As well as what kind of piece of production is it? Is it TV? Is it film? Is it theater? You know, like, is it a commercial? These all influence the way I work on the piece so that I can have a sense of clarity that pushes me forward to continue being curious, as opposed to anything that might make me feel blocked. Sometimes the decision to be like, I would just do this because it's a great gig and it pays well, is enough to be like, that's how I'm going to prepare the technicalities of this piece. And that's how I'm going to prepare for the audition. Like I said, it's not everything, but identifying what this job would mean to me is what influences my audition process. It's very variant, variable, whatever that would be.
I actually have no idea.
Varied. I think varied.
It's varied.
Yes.
Yes, I love that you talk about doing the research. Like, it's not just about analyzing the text and doing all that fun work. It's also about, especially for TV and film, what have these people done before? What is the pace of this show? What is the pace of the things that they've done? Because there are things that you can look at, you know, the words on a page, and you can, of course, create a whole world. But if you can do that, and if you really want to book the job, you can do your research and look at, you know, the tone of it, like what's, you know, things like that. I think is also really important.
Absolutely.
To combine with, you know, you and making the world your own.
Yeah, there's always so much work to be done. Always so much work to be done. Yeah.
So what were you doing when you didn't have an agent? Oh, well, you went to grad school right away.
Yeah.
So
cool.
Was there ever a time where you were looking for jobs on your own without representation?
I mean, I'd always audition for stuff, but not really, because I was always in school. I know come the fall, I'm going to be in school. Come the summer, I'm going to be working with Epic, the theater company now. So my kind of schedule and structure was always set in place in that way. But I would always audition for stuff, but not too much, not to the extent that I am now.
Right.
I probably auditioned for more things in the past 2 months than I have in my whole life, you know.
Fair. Love that for you. When you were auditioning on your own, what sites were you using at that time? Like, how did you find the auditions?
So they were mostly all in person, and through word of mouth and through my personal connects.
Interesting.
I
Very
wasn't using
cool.
any sites. I wasn't using any websites. I wasn't using Actors Access, Backstage, none of that. I would just hear about things through my professional connects, and they would recommend me for stuff. And that's how I get auditions. Yeah,
I love that.
I wasn't on any sites back then because
I
I knew I'd be in school. Yeah.
So I wanted to talk to you about that too. The importance of those professional connections, and how do you even begin to build that, and how do you build that in a way that feels natural and not like networking?
Oh my God, such a great question, yo.
Right.
That's such a great question.
Gotcha.
Yo, for real, because first of all, like, I'm somebody who, like, I think it begins with, like, why are you doing this thing that you want to do? You have to have that answer for yourself, because then networking is going to come from a genuine place as opposed to trying to get ahead. Right? So, like, if one wants to be an actor because they want to be famous, you're just going to talk to whoever or try to network with the people who have the most clout or status in the room. That's where that's going to go. And that's not healthy, in my opinion. But if one wants to be an actor because they want to be good at it, they love it, they're generally curious about it, then you network with everyone. You know what I mean? Like, even people who aren't actors, I still like to know about them. I'm still curious about them and their lives. I had this incredible conversation with somebody at a party who works in copywriting. They literally just they literally just work in what is copywritten and all the, like, policies around how papers and articles get copywritten. And I'm fascinated by this person.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, she's like asking me about what it means to be an actor, and talking to her about what it means to do this work, because I'm genuinely interested in not just getting ahead in my career, but in people and people in my communities who find success in very specific fields of study. Just people who find love, joy, passion, success in different areas of life. I'm curious about that. And especially being an actor, I think one should remain curious about everything and every kind of person, because not only is it the obvious aspect of, like, you can play and you have to be able to play all different types of people, but also because acting is such a collaborative field, It depends on groups of people to create things, especially in our country. So there are so many different kinds of people that might work with you in the future. I met someone who is a television tailor, cinematic tailor, right?
Oh, wow.
And he's not an artist in the same, a performing artist at all, right? Very quirky dude, and, like, you know, has terrible posture, and, like, does
That's exactly
you know, doesn't release his voice when he speaks, and, you know, all that stuff. Not a performer, but I'm not gonna be like, oh yeah, not, you know, I'm not gonna get to know this person, you know. So I think it comes from genuinely being curious about people, being curious about other aspects of life. I think that goes for everybody. You have to find what is interesting about anybody that you meet, because there is something interesting about them. And that doesn't have to lead anywhere. It can just be a kind of revelation about, wow, there are so many different kinds of people, especially in New York City. It's like, damn, that's really cool. That's enough for me. That's enough. That counts as networking for me. It's like, I know somebody who does this. That's cool. That's cool.
That is, yeah.
But I think finding that kind of holistic approach is what works for me, because on the other end of that, then people remember me for being a very curious, open-minded person, not a kind of cutthroat, looking for the successful route, result-oriented person. And I build my brand by being who I really am, genuinely curious about people. And that's how I'll be remembered when people think about who to hire, you know? Yeah.
That's so true. I love that you said, gosh, I forgot what it was. I just had it.
I talk so much, it's all good.
No, it's all really good stuff. It was just something that I had never really thought about in that way. You said be curious about people. Oh, you said to meet people who are passionate about what they are passionate about, right? Like,
yes,
even if they're not passionate about acting or performing arts, but to meet people who have like are driven towards something and love something as much as you love your thing, like that alone is really that's like who you want in your community and who you want around you.
Absolutely, because you'll find that those people have the most potential, because they're actually like invested passionately in what they're doing, and it'll be the most fruitful elements for like the future. Absolutely. I think we have comments in the chat.
Yes, so I was just gonna say, we have, what does your support system look like, and what advice would you give to a young actor who may feel alone in their journey?
Those are two really great questions, and they have different answers. My support system, fortunately, looks like my family, who support me in what I do, and my theater home, which is the theater company that I work with, Epic. Right. So I've found an artistic home and a familial home. So I think finding places that feel like home, finding people that feel like home, is what a support system looks like. People who, for different reasons, are where you can return to be reminded of who you really are. And that should be ideally different systems, different support systems and groups, because we are, multi-hyphenate people. We have different aspects of ourselves, and nobody's one thing. So having different groups in tandem with each other. And I sometimes think to myself, like, wow, like if this person I know met that person I know, like what that world
right, would like that would be weird.
That would be weird. Like that would be weird. And I like that about myself, because it means that I'm like, spreading myself out to different kinds of people. So those are my support system looks like, is like familial home and artistic home in people. To anybody, any young actor who may feel alone in their journey, first of all, if you're listening to this, you can reach out to me, literally. Number one, now you can consider me a resource, and you are no longer alone. Okay. The second thing I'll say about feeling alone in your journey is, I'll say two things about it. The first is something that was hard for me to grasp and learn, which is that being alone can be a very good thing. Feeling alone is tough, though. That's where it gets tricky, because being alone and feeling alone are two different things. And you can feel alone in a huge group of 1,000 people. You can feel alone being alone. But that kind of feeling of like, I'm by myself in this, I would be curious about why one might feel that way. Because what I found is in the real depths of my loneliness during the pandemic, where everybody's dealing with that, I found myself really making a self-fulfilling prophecy about what it meant to be alone and feel alone, where I would stop reaching out to people. I would convince myself that people didn't really want to hear about me or care about me or what's going on in my life. And for a vast majority of the time, or many of those cases, when I would reach out to people, that's not how it would go.
Yeah.
And similarly, in kind of getting out of my introverted shell, in like meeting new people, sometimes people's faces are intimidating for whatever reason. It's just like, I don't know you, so you look scary because I don't know what this means. Like, it looks like, don't talk to me, until I'm like, hey, what are you reading? I'm curious about that author. Oh, actually, I'm reading this really good book. And then they'll just open, right? Just like crack open. Yeah. And then it's like, oh, there's a whole person over there. So I would say the first thing I would say is like, gently interrogate why it is you feel that way, and ask yourself if there are not thoughts you have in your head that are convincing you of things that may not be true about other people, opinions about what other people might have, opinions about what other people think about you. Those things can go in a crazy loop, and they're really almost always based on things that aren't fully true. And maybe start to reach out to people on smaller scales. Hey, I saw you did this thing that's really cool, right? start to practice that, because I felt that way as well. And once I started to just reach out to my friends, reach out to family, reach out to just people in general, most of the time people return that energy, especially if it's coming from a good place. Yeah. The second thing I say, if you feel alone, if you feel alone, is to identify what is home for you. It kind of goes back to what my support system thing is like. Because where do you feel like at one with the thing that you are doing, with the activity or the place or the people that you are engaging with? There is some connection to something other than you in your life that you genuinely love or feel fulfilled by. There is. And if you haven't found it yet, then to continue to look for that thing, because then you will find through a spark of like curiosity that you can search and like excavate this like entire world of possibilities, whether it be from a person or not. I don't know if that makes sense. Like I love looking at things. Sorry, I'm just making sure my light works so you can see me. I love here's one thing about me. I love to look at stuff. I love how stuff looks, because I was born with a cataract in my right eye. And so through surgery, my right eye was left legally blind. And so I could have very nearly, I mean, if anything had gone wrong with my other eye, could have very nearly been blind, right? Very possibly been blind. So I generally love to just look at things, right? And just go out in nature and just look at trees and like look at the sky and just see how things operate upon the retinas in my eyes, and like how those things affect my interpretation of what's around me. And like, I feel at home when I can just like people watch and just like look at things. And then I'll kind of follow that rabbit hole. Is like, what kinds of things lend themselves to that fulfillment? Theater, right? Theater is a great place to people watch, right? Or like a cafe, or like going to the park and stuff like that. And then I'll identify places and spaces in which I can feel at home. Maybe not even with people yet, but the kinds of things I might love to do. Obviously, I love theater. We all know this. But if I didn't, I can interrogate that kind of like deep fulfillment I get from this very simple thing until I'm like, these are the kind of spaces maybe I should go out and find myself in. From the very simple things that I love. So yeah, I'd say, ask yourself if you're not telling yourself things that may not be true, and kind of interrogate the simplest things that really give you fulfillment, and just like dive into them in terms of what communities and spaces you can find yourself in that revolve around that.
Yeah, those are really good answers.
Thank you.
Those are really good answers. Thank you. Yeah.
And then Bugs, yes, he said being alone can be, or no, Bugs said your relationships aren't transactional. Love that. Yes. Seriously, that's very toxic. They're transactional.
Also said being alone and feeling alone are two different things. Taking note. That's a fact. That's actually something that we're gonna wrap up in a bit, but that was something that you said that resonated with me, because I have also been through that, specifically about loneliness, where I had to investigate why I was always in a relationship, and so there was that. And then once I decided, okay, why is it that I am always in a relationship? I feel lonely when I'm not. Why do I feel lonely when I'm not? Because it feels like I have nobody else or anything else. Right. Is that true?
Right.
Right. Is that really true?
Right.
Like, and it does take, it just, like you said, it takes a second. It takes a mindful moment to ask yourself, what is the truth? Yes. What is the fact?
Yes.
I'm telling myself that nobody wants to talk to me, that I'm a burden. Okay, who has told me that though?
Right.
Has anyone actually told me that? And there's, of course, there are instances where they have. But most times, it's your mind creating those things.
For real.
Really, really good answers. Thank you for that. That was really, really great.
Those are great questions.
Okay, great. So that was the last question in the chat box here. So to finish off, is there I feel like we only scratched the surface. It's like so
I
much
know,
to talk
right?
about.
Such a great
But to end off, what is anything that you would like to say to not just young actors, but young people that you want to leave with them?
You know, honestly, I feel like young people are they on the right track for the most part, especially in the artistic worlds that I've been in. It's tough though. You know, it's tough to, if there's like anything I would say, because I really do learn a lot from young folks. I'm only 25. I be talking, you know what I mean? I'm not, you know,
the young
yeah, I'm not 60. But like, just like in the way in which already people are just 15, 16 already, I'm like, wow, I would have never thought to work that way. Yeah. I would have never been so informed about that at that age. I would have never been so, you know what I mean? Just kind of like already seeing how emboldened young people are. So I guess the thing I'd say is like to really remain curious about yourself, about oneself. Because that's the only real danger I see in young people, like, is when they start to really like stop caring about who they are, like stop questioning who they are, like re-identifying with things, start to presume they know. I did that at 16. You know, I definitely did that at 16 of like, yeah, I think I got it. I figured it out. I know how things go. I know what's going on here. No, for sure. And then it took a lot of like heartache and challenges and mistakes to like learn how to re-identify, and which I'm still doing to this day.
Yeah.
So I think like remaining curious about why it is that you do the things you do. And also a really important tip that I think I have is that it's a little bit into the world of like, I don't know what field of science it might be, but like the way in which habits are developed at such a young age in a person. And that by the time you're a teenager, you have a lot of habits around the way you look and work in the world that you may not have even identified yet. And that take you a number of years to reestablish once you've identified how they may be toxic in your life. So for me, it was like a real habit of like doing everything myself. Just like never even questioning the fact that I don't really ask for help. Like not really even noticing that. And now I'm like, yo, that's crazy. Like I have so many relationships that I have not fostered well enough because I have depended on myself and just waited for people to reach out to me or waited for whatever, what have you. So that's just to say, like, identify, like, be aware that you're starting to build habits already, even as a young person. You're starting to build a process. So slow down. Like, slow down with things. So that you don't start to like concretize a way of working or being that's going to be really hard to undo when you realize it's not fruitful for your future.
Yeah.
So like slow down, be patient, and stay curious about yourself. These are all things people told me, and I was like, man, whatever. I'm gonna damn. I got homework to do.
I know what I'm doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for this very insightful and thoughtful conversation. You are awesome.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Happy to be here. Yeah. That's real. Don't be afraid to slow down. The habits go. You get to hear that myself.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And I'll say one more thing, Jalen, like letting habits go. I know we're out of time. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Letting habits go is incredibly difficult. It is so difficult. It is so hard. And like, you have to be incredibly intentional about what it is that you're doing and be more honest with yourself than you've ever been when you're trying to break any kind of habits. You got to like really be like, you know, I'm trying to eat healthier, but like I can have a donut. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Like you can't play yourself. Don't play yourself. Those habits take a long time to break. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. That was a great way to end off because it's true. They'd be hard.
It'd be hard.
Yeah. Okay. Well, again,
thank you so
much for taking the time out.
Jolie, man. Thanks.
Thank you for everyone who tuned in, and obviously follow Xavier, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Xavier. Have a good night.
Thank you for having me. Good night.
Absolutely.
Bye, y'all.